Hi, everybody. This is Richard Lewellen, and I'm representing, on behalf of David Mills, the SEJC task force to look at inclusion and sensitivity in our song selection and contests. And, we've come to know that there are some folks who might feel excluded by certain songs that have been performed in contests, and we want to address that. But at the same time, we know that our BHS membership is full of people who are kind and generous and fair-minded, and yet may all have different opinions about how much they would want C&J or the BHS leadership to be legislating song selection. Some of these folks feel like, hey, people should just be able to take a joke or should have thicker skins or are just being too sensitive. And others feel like, there have been songs that have been demeaning to women or to people with disabilities or African Americans or people of different body shapes. And over time, we've seen a lot of these songs just not sung as often as they used to be. And then there were a few things that actually did become rules at different points along the way. But I think it's important that when we talk about inclusion and sensitivity, that includes all of our members who may not have the same opinion about how to approach the topic. But I think it's fair that even folks that don't want song selection legislated, at the same time, they wouldn't want to perform songs knowing that they would cause hurt or discomfort to somebody else. So in some ways, this is a question of awareness about how other people might feel about some of these things. So what we want to do is just touch base. I'm just going to look at some notes here, just to touch base about where some of this all comes from. Now, if we focus our attention back to songs from the Tin Pan Alley era, this is perhaps the heart of the early barbershop songs that folks were looking to preserve. We find a staggering number of references and themes that emerged from characters that were portrayed in minstrel shows before, during, and after the Civil War. Theatrical entrepreneurs and performers from the North were the driving force behind these shows from the 1830s up through the 1880s. Individual songs, initially by the Jim Crow character, had morphed into small ensemble shows in the 1840s, and then into large theatrical productions by the time we got to the 1850s minstrel shows. Actors in blackface explored prurient themes with sexually charged material, all the while portraying the African American as one of a number of archetypal characters. One was Jim Crow, who was stupid, wily, lazy, a trickster, dishonest, longing for the plantation where living was easy. The next character was the Zip Coon character. He was the dandy, the professor. He was a flashy dresser, acting above his station, lascivious, oversexed, using mangled highfalutin language as an object of ridicule. Then there a familiar character, the Mammy character. This was the favored slave, the wise woman. She raised the master's white and mixed race offspring and was an apologist for plantation life. And there was Honey, who was the young mixed race woman. She was a sex object. She was lascivious. She was the product of rape. She was the object of rape. She was the wanton woman, the vamp. And then there was the old uncle character, an old male slave who stayed on the plantation or longs to get back to that simple life. Much of this music had a prominent theme of sentimental longing for the antebellum South. At the same time, and often in the same song, African American propaganda was spread with these false stereotypes for the purpose of keeping slaves on the plantation or having freed slaves returned there. Minstrel shows potently delivered this message with humor, dance, exciting African rhythms, and lyrical songs from composers like Stephen Foster. Uh, these are some of the roots of popular music. By the 1890s, African American gospel music has entered the mainstream of popular music and helped stimulate the growth of this emerging industry. An insatiable appetite for dance tunes, many of them cakewalks, and printed on sheet music with lyrics and prurient images of the coon songs, fueled the birth of Tin Pan Alley. This music featured the Zip Coon character and the honey stereotype with their illicit sexuality, fancy clothing, uppity language, and comic mishaps that resulted from their low character. This is the setting in the years just prior to the first barbershop recordings of the American Quartet. As we've seen in Harmonizer articles, African American ragtime and jazz musicians grew up singing in barbershop quartets. Even the term barbershop had the connotation of low African American music that featured African rhythms and melody alteration in search of new chords. What do we do with this information? A great challenge in the attempt to draw the line and create a list of songs to include that have these stereotypical characters and themes from minstrelsy. The problem is that this stuff pervades popular music even today. The web of influence on these ideas grew and flowed through jazz and the American musical, country music, R&B, rock and roll, into the music that we hear today. And, acknowledging this, perhaps a place to start is to raise awareness about some of these ideas and let our performers make the choices for themselves. As in the past, date rape songs, material ridiculing people who were overweight or had disabilities, these songs have largely disappeared from our performances, and so too have the Mammy songs. Perhaps other songs will also just naturally fall by the wayside as we engage in discussion about this stuff. Now, as judges, what do we do? SCJC is not making a firm recommendation about any kind of a list excluding songs, but we will find ourselves giving evaluations to folks, and certainly in the performance category, they are going to adjudicate whether something is in good taste or not. I think we would encourage judges to help raise awareness about some of these issues before we start being punitive with our scores. We want to have people make the choice for themselves about whether to sing some of these songs. And then over time, we'll get to a place very likely where, just like we don't hear After Dark sung very much anymore, and that was the first song I ever sung in barbershop, others of our beloved songs that we grew up singing, perhaps our parents were singing, some of those songs just won't be sung anymore. I think that that's just natural that would happen. But what's important is that this discussion includes everybody, and the folks who might feel accused or actually be accused of being racist or sexist or just selfish about wanting to sing their favorite songs. That's not being inclusive. If we're going to be inclusive, we need to include everybody, all of us. And so we need to allow each other to have different opinions about this stuff, and find a way to move forward together just by becoming more aware of the kinds of things that might concern some of the folks in our audience who we would like to one day be part of our barbershop family. One particular example of a neat thing that's happening is there's an African American quartet named Halo, And they have started a series of conversations on Sundays called Race and Real Talk. And it's like small workshop or town hall meetings. And we're going to make sure to refer you all to some of their material. That's one approach. Another is that when we're out on the road doing our evaluations, when we're out there coaching, as kindly and as respectfully as possible, I think it's fair for us to raise some of these issues. And finally, one thing that we could do is start to look at some of the songs that we sing that we may not be aware have references to the honey character or that Zip Coon character as the professor, the dandy, the ladies' man. Some of that stuff maybe gets sanitized over time because we've done some lyric changes and enough time has passed and maybe it's okay. But in other cases, even with a lyric change, some folks in the audience really know where that stuff comes from and know that there's a kind of a hidden message inside some of those songs, some of that same propaganda from before the war, the Civil War. So it goes back a long way, but as we move forward, knowing that these kinds of issues are just all throughout our music, the main thing is that we just have a process of being kind to each other, being fair and respectful with each other, and at the same time being willing to learn some new things that might affect our choices in our contest material. So that's all for now, and I'm sure we'll be continuing this conversation. Thank you.